The following interview is with Paul Kingsnorth, an Englishman living on a small farm in Western Ireland. He's an acclaimed novelist, essayist, and poet. And he has quite a remarkable story of coming to Christianity and Orthodoxy in particular. That was one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to him, to get his story recorded. He wrote a lovely essay called The Cross and the Machine in First Things, which I will link to below this video. And you can read more in depth his story. Yep. Let's see. So going back a bit to your coming to Christianity, in your article, you mentioned, you write, Enlightenment liberal societies had thrown off that is, Christianity's shackles. And however hard both species of vicar tried to prevent it, religion was dying a much needed death at the hands of progress and reason. Are you able to go in more deeply into the process by which you came to realize that the Christianity that you understood was a caricature? Was there anything that you read or other experiences that maybe you had that helped you to understand that what you'd been taught about Christianity wasn't true?
Well, yeah, as I say, I mean, it's I think, growing up in Britain, when I was growing up, it was almost as if, the Church of England, obviously, which is the Anglican Church, is a Protestant church and had been the national church, and still in theory is the national church, although I think I read recently that only 3% of 18 to 25-year-olds are members of the Church of England. I'm surprised it's that high, actually. So it's actually not a national church at all. There are far more African immigrants involved in the Anglican Church in England than actual, native English people. We all wandered off, and actually it's mainly being held up by people. We're having missionaries sent from Africa and back to Europe, which it's quite a nice historical irony. I mean, actually here in Ireland, interestingly, a similar thing is happening. They can't find priests for the churches at all. My local priest is Nigerian, young Nigerian man. There's a couple of priests up in Connemara, where I was on holiday, who are Indian, and another one who's Polish, because the Irish people don't want to be Catholic priests anymore. So as I say, we're having, if Europe is going to become Christian again, it's going to be through missionaries sent from from Asia or Africa, which will be, as I say, a nice little historical twist. So yeah, we've, the English sort of gave up and wandered off on Christianity for whatever reason. And so the Christianity I was taught even then felt like people were sort of going through the motions. So it felt like either a very kind of weary Church of England version of a quite Victorian sort of faith, which didn't seem at all relevant to us, or it felt like, a new species of trendy vicar trying to make Christianity relevant to young people, which was just a bit embarrassing and awful. Even it was done well. It was done with good intention. But it's the old story of the more sort of relevant to modernity you try to make religion, the more irrelevant it actually seems, because once you strip out the mystery and the depth and the uncompromising truth of it, then all you've got is a kind of an attempt to turn Jesus into your friend. And there's no reason anyone would actually bother with that. The only reason to be a Christian, as far as I can see, is if you actually believe that Christ is resurrected, and he is a manifestation of the divine. If you don't believe that, then it's just some good advice from a man 2,000 years ago. You have to have that central belief in the resurrection and in who Christ was. If you don't have that, and I think a lot of contemporary Christians in Britain don't really have it, or didn't have it then I think probably that what I'm trying to say is there was a sort of sense that even the people teaching us didn't quite believe it, because at one level, the whole claim is insane. I mean, I think this is a really interesting thing to say to people. Christianity is a very weird religion, very strange religion, and the central claim is pretty bonkers by any rational standards. So you've got to suspend your scientific Richard Dawkins-like probabilities. it's very, very, it's a very unusual religion, almost unique in its strangeness. In that sense, that God takes human form, comes to earth, deliberately dies, is reborn, and that's the story. That's deliberate. That's part of the salvation project. That's also a series of lessons that you have to learn. That's the way back home from the garden you've fallen from. I mean, it's a brilliant story, but it's not at all one that sits well with the modern mind. And it seems like a lot of Christians find it difficult to tell that story. And it was one of the reasons I was attracted to Orthodoxy, because Orthodox Christians have no difficulty at all telling it. They have no problem talking about this. They don't compromise. They don't shilly-shally around. They just say, nope, this is the story. And by the way, Satan is real. And, you think, okay, great. Well, this is what Christianity is, and it's still the ancient faith in that way. So I think that, reading people like Seraphim Rose and coming across Orthodoxy, which is an uncompromising version of the faith, and realizing that was what I wanted, because I had a series of experiences which led me to believe that this was true. And so I wanted a church that believed it was true as well and wasn't going to change its mind according to what society was doing. And I didn't want to talk to 10 different priests and get 10 different opinions about who Jesus was. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be taught. And I think that, again, if you look at something like the Christianity of a lot of African people in Britain, or even Muslims, or people from older faiths like that, or Sikhism, which is, as I say, my wife's religion, there's, again, it does have that sort of lack of compromise about it. It's people who say, well, this is what we believe in, and we're going to live like it's true. And that's what Christians need to do too. Otherwise, why bother? And Orthodox people do. So there was just a number of things I'd read and come across that made me realize that there was something very solid to this. There was a path I could follow, and it would be quite hard work, which it is. All the fasting you have to do, and the praying, and the liturgies, and it's not standing up for 2 hours in the church. It's not easy in some ways. So but I like that kind of a challenge, I suppose. So it's there's just a number of things that when I started to look into traditional forms of Christianity, I realized that, as I said, there was something very powerful to it that we'd lost in the West. I think probably through the Reformation. Certainly by then, I think that in the West, the killing off of literally sometimes the monks and the nuns, the destruction of the monasteries, the throwing out of the saints, all of that strips the heart right out of the faith. And then obviously all you're left with is the Bible, and then you just argue about that for 500 years. But there's something deeply missing from it. Once you take out the saints and you take out the monastic tradition from Christianity, you've lost what makes it. Actually, you've lost you've got Christ, and obviously you've got the Gospels, but you haven't got the 2,000-year tradition of people actually living it. Because through the saints and through the monastic tradition, you can see what it actually means to be a Christian, and you can see it still happening today. And it's a little bit like, say, if you're a Buddhist, you look to, say, the examples of Tibet, and you say, well, look at this. This is a real Buddhist culture, and you've got all these people actually living this, and there are still monasteries all over the Far East today. I think this is something just very broken, actually, at the heart of Western Christianity. So, for that reason, So as I say, we'll have to be re-evangelized by Africans and Indians and Orthodox Christians and all sorts of people are going to have to come and rescue us from the mistake we made, I think.
Do you think this is what's behind the machine? Is this why the machine was created?
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? I mean, what really fascinates me about Christianity is, well, many things, but the story that gets me all the time is the story of the fall. Which I tried to write about a little bit in that First Things piece, and I'd like to think about it a bit more. But the notion that, in the original time, if you like, humans are in communion with God, and we're in communion with everything else as well. So life is, the symbology of this is a garden. We're all in a garden. And we're so close to God that we can literally see him walking around and talk to him. And we're so close to all the other creatures that they're all walking around too. And everything's, as one, if you like. So we've got a union, and then we choose we choose egotism, we choose power, we choose knowledge, obviously, over that communion. We say, we're not going to stay here. and be obedient, if you like, to the structure of creation. We're going to break the structure, and we're going to do it better ourselves because we don't see why we should do what you say, which is obviously what the tempting snake tells us. Well, God just wants to keep all this for himself. You can be as good as him. So off we go, and we deliberately break that communion, and we fall out of that garden, and then the angel is placed at the gates, and we can't get back in. And now we're here, farming and dying, and doing the back-breaking labor and fighting each other and all the rest of it. And the ultimate manifestation of what you do after the fall is you try to create a world for yourself. You try to create a better world. You try to control the world and grip the world and create a world that's for humans, because you're trying to show you can do better than God in a way. And this thing I call the machine, this manifestation of technology and power and the great sort of centralizing tendencies of civilization, that's the ultimate manifestation of the fall. That's the result of eating the apple from the tree of knowledge. We're going to end up trying to live forever and send ourselves into space and colonize the galaxy and download our minds into computer chips, because that's where this path is going to lead us, because this is what you do if you think you can control and remake the whole universe in your own narrow human image. And it ends in tragedy. The climate's changing, and the ecosystems are collapsing, and society's coming apart. And we're trying to get, Jeff Bezos is trying to go into space. This is where it goes. So there's a direct line from choosing to eat that apple and to rebel against God and break the communion with the rest of life and getting to where we are. Yeah. So it's a really interesting, to me, it's just a very powerful story of, that tells us thousands of years ago where we're going to end up. And the teachings of Christ are the way back home, ultimately. And the sacrifice of Christ is the way back home. And if we follow the path he sets out for us, or even try to, then we have a path back to the garden, if you like, which is, it's a hard path to walk, but it's probably the only one available.
Yeah.
Did years burn out those words? Did a voice whisper absurd? Did your mind comprehend and ask if you'd last till the end?